Hello, good evening, and welcome everyone. Thank you for coming to tonight's webinar. As we begin and we're waiting for folks to enter the room, thank you for joining us on this topic for caring for our local waterways. And I'd like to just go over a very simple, brief tech orientation for our new folks in the room and even some seasoned folks, just some tips on some good etiquette to ensure we have a smooth program this evening. So please keep yourself muted during the presentation. There will be a time at the end of this webinar where we can unmute and we'll be able to speak with the presenters directly. If you need help, please use the chat feature to direct message and our IPC staff will be available for assistance. And again, this is being recorded, so please keep your camera off if you do not want your image to be shown during this program. All right. One other thing, and I'll be putting that in the chat in just a moment. It will be an evaluation for this webinar. We really appreciate your feedback. So any thoughts, opinions about the topic or future topics you would like to see covered, please feel free to let us know in that evaluation link that'll be coming to you shortly. This is my wonderful team. It's such a privilege to work with such a great group of people. As you can see, I'm up in the front. And for any folks who are unfamiliar with me, I'm one of the outreach coordinators for the greater DMV area, including Montgomery County, Prince George's, and Frederick. So if you find yourself in that area and you want to connect, please reach out. And this is just tonight's lineup. As you can see, we're going to start with a land acknowledgement, and then we'll briefly take a look at our sponsors, partners, and funders who we owe a great deal of gratitude for. We couldn't get this work done without them. We also want to give folks a little bit of information on our One Water partnership. You'll get a chance to meet our amazing panelists. We'll have time for discussion with Q&A, and then we'll close out the program with a prayer. And so if you would mind remaining mute while we just take this moment. And I'd like to open with this land acknowledgement. This is an abridged version. Today, we hold space for reflection on and gratitude for the land upon which we live and the local waters that support and nourish us all. We recognize that this land and these waters were stewarded by many who came before. We reflect together as people of faith in response to the calling of our hearts to come alongside the original stewards of this land and these waters that sustain us all. We seek to change the narrative of this story, our story, towards one of harmony with the gifts of creation and all living beings. We ask you to honor and learn from their intimate connection, love, and appreciation of these sacred lands and waters. And there will also be a link that we invite you to take a look at your own leisure, but just bear in mind, it's a most recent snapshot, maybe about of a 500 to 1,000 years of history, where we know there's more than 15,000 years of Indigenous history in our region. And now I'd like to open with a Jewish prayer. Blessed are you, eternal, our God, ruler of the universe, who speaks the evening into being, whose wisdom opens heaven's gates, whose understanding changes time and seasons, and arranges the stars in their heavenly courses according to plan. You are creator of day and night, rolling light away from darkness and darkness from light, transforming day into night and distinguishing one from the other. Ever-living God, may you reign continually over us into eternity. Blessed are you, eternal one who brings on evening. Thank you so much for taking that moment of reflection. As I mentioned, here's just a few of our partners and funders who we owe a great deal of gratitude for this work that we're able to do. And as we move on to the next slide, let's just take a look at what our organization represents for new folks in the room. We kind of act as a connector group between local governments, faith communities, and other environmental partners. And next, this was the One Water partnership that I talked about. This is just a really cool map that shows that you're not alone. There's a lot of other folks joining the movement, and we'll be happy to provide a little bit more information post this webinar and our follow-up reporting. And last but not least, I could not forget to mention our summer training that's coming up. If you have green teams and you need to get some skills or just freshen up, looking for new resources, please register and join us for our June session. And last but not least, we also have additional resources like action kits, prayers. There's so many things that we can help you with. And if you're not sure where to start, please feel free to reach out and I'm happy to help. All right, so let's shift gears and get into why we're all here. I am very happy to give a warm welcome to Potomac River Keeper, Dean Naujoks. This is a very special topic, and he is the expert to talk about what's going on in our waterways. And so please welcome Dean.
So should I upload my PowerPoint? Hey everybody, Dean Naujoks.
Yes.
Stupid calling us right there.
So we're blanked out.
And bear with me one moment, Dean. It looks like I blocked you from sharing screen. So thanks so much for your patience. Let me just make sure you're co-host again. Sorry about that, folks. Okay, should be good to go. Thanks for your patience. Oh, Dean, could you unmute yourself? Sorry,
Yep.
I think there we go. Perfect. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm trying to. I don't know why I'm having trouble. I've done this plenty of times. Oh boy.
Doesn't help that they recently changed things. So yeah, let me know if I can assist.
Okay. I'm very sorry, all. But anyway, my name is Dean Naujoks. I'm the Potomac Riverkeeper, and I work for Potomac Riverkeeper Network. And I'm trying to figure out how to get this thing. Can you see this?
Yes.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we can
Yes.
see your screen.
Okay, but yeah, I'm trying to get it started, but this bar is blocking my ability to start from the beginning. Okay, hold on a second.
Slide.
Why is this? What's going on here? This is terrible.
There you go.
Okay, my God. Sorry about that, y'all. Anyway, so yeah, so basically my organization, we protect the public's right to clean water, and we enforce clean water laws. Of course, my daughter's calling the second I'm on here. And what we do is we patrol and we defend the Potomac River. And what we do is we identify sources of pollution and we work to eliminate sources of pollution. And we're a nonprofit, we're not a state agency. So the way we do that is we use the Clean Water Act to enforce clean water laws, right? And hold polluters accountable. And these are some of the cases and settlements that we've had in past years. And just kind of Riverkeeper 101, basically, for an organization or a person like you, the Clean Water Act gives the authority for anybody to protect and defend their waterways and hold polluters accountable if it's an ongoing pollution source and the state agencies are failing to enforce clean water laws, right? And so, when we do these, when I go after and start looking at an issue, we do patrols. We have volunteer pilots. We use drones. I have a patrol boat. We do sampling. And basically we go out and we investigate. We build a case as if we're going to go to trial from day one, from the moment we start investigating, right? And we do proper chain of custody for all the sampling we do. These are just some of the issues, some of the images that we've captured from like aerial footage from Morgantown coal plant downriver on the Potomac River. These are toxic coal ash seeps from Dominion Power across the river. We recently won a big lawsuit against Alexandria for oil discharges that were discharging to the Potomac River for over 45 years without a permit. This was illegal. And again, the state agency, the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality, was really doing nothing about this. They actually put Alexandria agreed to be put under this voluntary remediation program, but it really didn't do a whole lot to actually fix and solve the pollution issue, right? So finally, after negotiations of 6 years and trying to get them to fix it, we finally filed a lawsuit in 2022. We reached a settlement just late last year, and that's going to clean up and eliminate all that pollution. It's going to dredge the sediments in the bottom. One of the cool things is instead of a fine or penalty, which the Department of Justice actually requires, we negotiated an agreement. It's called the Supplemental Environmental Project. That money, the fine and penalty, rather than go to the Department of Treasury, goes back into the river, right? And we don't collect anything. It's just about suing and holding the polluters accountable and fixing the problem. We leverage about $2 million a year in free legal service for the Potomac River every single year. So this is a real significant benefit. Our organization is about a $2 million organization. We only have about 12 staff, but we operate more like a $5 million organization with all the free legal help and all the technical consultants we get. And this is some of the results of that work right at the Alexandria waterfront, just cleaning up all this toxic coal tar. If you're familiar with the Del Carlia water treatment plant, right on the Montgomery County border, some kayakers saw black sludge discharges that were occurring back in January of 2022. I've been dealing with this for a couple of years now. The state of Maryland now is actually going to require them to get a discharge permit. They were illegally routing contamination from, it's called wastewater, basically, from their water treatment plant, backwater, and it has chlorine and other organic matter in it, and it's basically an unpermitted discharge. So we are working with the legal team, but that's just some of the things that we are dealing with here on the Potomac. I mentioned this Morgantown downriver. This is something we investigated for quite a long time, for many, many years, and this is one of the larger coal-fired power plants. I'm very proud to say that we successfully challenged the permits for both the Dickerson plant in Montgomery County and the Morgantown plant. And we got limits put in there to eliminate arsenic, mercury, selenium, and nitrogen discharges to the Potomac River. And that was in 2017, 2018. We partnered with Sierra Club Environmental Integrity Project. The good thing is that these plants now have closed down, right? So these are massive polluters, both air pollution and water pollution, that are no longer discharging and causing problems, yet there's still legacy contamination, right? So one of the things that we do is we went down river from the plant and we paddled up. We put canoes on our Riverkeeper boat. We get sampling, and this is from drone footage, and we go up to where we think that there's illegal contamination being discharged into, this is called Pascahansa Creek, right? So and this right here, if you can see, there's a little tributary that kind of flows through the plant, through the middle of the plant. But in 2021, 2019, I'm sorry, we got a tip from employees that they were illegally spreading coal ash and CCR materials, coal rubble, at the plant. I got a pilot up, and we caught them red-handed doing it. Led to a $100,000 penalty. And since 2020, we've collected, we haven't collected, but because of our investigations and turning this over to authorities, $1.5 million in penalties against polluters that were doing things illegally or improperly. And like I said, we led to the closure of these two massive coal-fired power plants. But this coal ash contamination and this coal ash legacy is something that we're still working on in Maryland. We worked on legislation this year. It didn't make it at a committee. But what we're trying to do is recycle this coal ash. It's called beneficial encapsulation. There are 3 major coal ash landfills, one in Charles County, one in Prince George's County, one in Montgomery County, and they're filled with all this coal ash. And these are leaking toxic coal ash landfills that are leaking in the contaminating groundwater with all these heavy metals like mercury and arsenic and cobalt and lead and radium-226. And so, these are one of the best ways to deal with this is recycling this ash and encapsulating it, put it in a brick and block and moving it. And that's actually happening in Montgomery County as a result of the work that we did. And we want to see this happen across the state. And that's one of the things that we're working on, in addition to making GenOn clean up, because they've shuttered these plants. And basically what's happening now, as time goes on, they're walking away from this problem. And the state of Maryland has not been doing enough, MDE, to hold them accountable. And that's one of the things that we've really worked on. So we've had public hearings and we've worked with Charles County, the NAACP and all sorts of group. But one thing I know a lot of you are very into the climate issue. When you recycle coal ash, for every ton of coal ash that you recycle, that's 1 ton of CO2 that is not going into the atmosphere. So it is really, really important for like the cement industry, which, we're going to continue building roads and buildings. We all know that's going to happen. To recycle this coal ash, making concrete is super intensive energy use, busting up the lime and things that go into it. And so using coal ash actually reduces CO2 emissions significantly. There's a company called Heidelberg that's doing this now and working in United States and right in Montgomery County on this issue. But that's just kind of the stuff that we do. And one of the big issues that is a real hot issue for us right now, we kind of discovered through our investigations of the Morgantown coal-fired power plant. When we were down there sampling, we kept hearing loud explosions on the Potomac River. I don't know if many of you are aware, but the largest and really only open water test range in the entire country is on the lower Potomac River. It's 51 miles. And they do all sorts of weapons testing from the Dahlgren plant on the Virginia side. And they shoot and fire all these weapons, and they're doing all these experimental weapons. They're releasing biological and chemical simulants into the river, and they have no Clean Water Act permit to do that. So through our investigation into coal plants, we found about this issue. We started investigating it. We started working with Natural Resource Defense Council, and basically we found out that the Navy over 90 years has discharged 33 million pounds of ordnance into the river. And so, we had concerns because the Navy then was talking about expanding this 51-mile weapons testing range just this past year. And if you look at this list, this is in their own environmental impact statement. It basically shows like there's 8,000 pounds of lead that they've discharged in the river. And you look at all these contaminants, things like cobalt, which are toxic, lead, there's all sorts of stuff that's in these weapons testing that's going into the river, and they don't have a permit to discharge, right? So this is kind of the activity since 1918. Weapons testing has increased and decreased, but particularly increased during times of war. Ironically, since the Clean Water Act, since environmental laws kicked in, we've seen a lot more weapons testing in the Potomac River. And basically, this is some of the stuff that you will find in here. I'm not going to read all this out, but what really concerns us is the idea that they're releasing these biological and chemical simulants to test their weapons testing capabilities or detection capabilities. And under the Clean Water Act, it's very clear that this type of activity is supposed to be regulated with a Clean Water Act permit. And so when we heard that the Navy was actually going to expand, right, its weapons testing range, we tried to meet with them. They refused to meet with us. So we filed notice of intent to sue in January of 2023. And started moving forward. And this area right here, if you're familiar with Colonial Beach, right across from Colonial Beach is an area called the Dense Zone, where they've discharged more than 69,000 projectiles per nautical square mile. And this is where the river's like 5 miles wide, and this dense zone is, a couple thousand yards long. So, it's a real concern to us, the impact that this is having on the river. And basically what the Navy says is that, hey, all this breaks up over the water and all of it goes into the sediments, and there's no impact to the river whatsoever. That's what their own environmental impact statement says. But it's all based on modeling assumption. There's no science, there's no data. Everything that we do is based on science and law, right? Anytime that we sue a polluter, it's based on science and it's based on the fact that they're breaking the law. And that's why we win 95% of our cases. Well, we met with the Navy. And we also filed an Endangered Species Act claim to protect the Atlantic sturgeon. And that was a real concern to us as well. But basically, this is all based on modeling. These are some of the projectiles that watermen have pulled out of the river. So the Navy's assumptions that basically that all of these weapons are just exploding and breaking up and then going into the sediments. And some of these rockets were fired into the river over 50 years ago, and you have watermen pulling these up, right? So we don't believe what their environmental impact statement says. And there's no science to support their claims and their modeling assumptions. So you can see under the Clean Water Act, this is regulated. Long story short, we did move forward with filing our case after we met with the Navy. We did drop the endangered species claim because they said that they were going to work with the Marine Fisheries Program to address the issues with the endangered Atlantic sturgeon. And so, you know, this is one of the oldest fish in North America. It was listed as an endangered species in the Potomac, and the entire Potomac River from Chesapeake Bay all the way to Great Falls was listed as critical habitat in 2017. And so the Navy has done nothing to protect the endangered Atlantic sturgeon. And, you know, the good thing is the Navy is now working on that, but one of the settlement agreements. So we actually reached a settlement agreement with the Navy. They agreed to get a Clean Water Act permit. So we actually won that issue. The next big round now is getting effective limits that are protective of water quality. And part of that agreement, or part of our settlement agreement, was we wanted to see their comments to the U.S. Marine Fisheries about what they were doing with the Atlantic sturgeon. Well, sure enough, they sent in their comments saying, hey, we've been looking, we don't see any sturgeon. Our weapons all explode above the surface. There's no impact to the Atlantic sturgeon. So now we're having to hiring a sturgeon expert to get in and start dealing with this issue. But this is the type of work that we do day in and day out to protect and defend this important public resource that provides more than 5 million people with drinking water. It's a public resource that hundreds of thousands of people recreate on every single year. And this Atlantic sturgeon obviously is an endangered species that we feel is worthy of protection. And one of the things that we're looking for in the new permit that is going to be required now that we won our case is seasonal limits that are protective of the endangered Atlantic sturgeon, which will protect all of the spawning fish if those seasonal limits are put in. This is some of the headlines that we had in terms of our victory, making the Navy get a Clean Water Act permit. But, you know, this is no easy task. You know, you're taking on the U.S. Navy in a lawsuit, you know, and you have members of Congress that think you're a communist from China because you're just trying to make the Navy do what's required for anybody else that's discharging into the Potomac River or any waters of the United States. They have to have a Clean Water Act permit. And they have to meet limits that are protective of water quality. And so that's our job day in and day out, is to enforce that and hold those polluters accountable. I could give you a million other examples of things that we're working on. But in the interest of time, before we turn over to Sherry, I want to say we've made a lot of progress in cleaning up the river. It's a success story. We have our Swimmable Potomac campaign, and we're doing a lot with water quality monitoring program. We have a lab down at National Harbor, and we have 100 trained volunteers, and we're getting ready to do trainings. If anybody's interested in becoming a water quality monitor volunteer for Potomac Riverkeeper Network, I can just connect with us. I can send some links in the chat. But one thing I do want to say is I've been here for almost 10 years now, and I've been alarmed at the amount of plastic pollution that's in our waterways. And, you know, really, it's becoming a crisis. And I know many people look at plastic and pollution and think of it, well, it's just trash. It's just on the side of the road, and it's ugly and it's awful, but it's not a crisis. And I've learned after doing this work for almost 30 years, and I've had to re-educate myself, that this isn't an ocean issue. This is a global crisis. Our children now have plastic in their lungs. It's in umbilical cords. They're now linking plastic and microplastics to heart disease and heart attacks in people my age and older. And in this issue, in 2018, China basically said, we're not taking your recyclables anymore. And I'm sure many of you know that. And as a result, now we have a landfill crisis, and our recycling programs are falling apart all over the country. And so one of the things that Potomac Riverkeeper has committed ourselves to is to partner with Trash Free Maryland to deal with this plastic crisis. And the plastic crisis is the climate crisis. And I'm sure you all recognize that, but I don't think most people do. And what we're trying to do is start educating people that this is a serious crisis. It's a public health risk. It's part of the climate crisis, and we need to do a lot more. And I could talk all day about this issue, but Sherry's been working with a bunch of partners in Maryland on legislation, and she's here to talk to you about it. And we are very much supportive of that. And I'm happy to take questions after she's done. But thank you for having me tonight. And thank you for everything that you do to safeguard our environment and fight for climate change and protect our public waterways. And I hope you come out to our big Earth Day cleanup on April 27th. I'll put a link in the chat. It's at Oxon Hill. It's one of the largest Earth Day cleanups in the region. And at that, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dean. One, I greatly appreciate some of that historical information about the weapons testing. I feel a little silly being a long-term resident. You know, and I always knew that there was involvement, but not to that extent. So I'm grateful for that information and also setting the stage for Sherry. I will not waste any more of your time. I want to hand it over to Sherry. She's really amazing and just all around work that the same mission that we work for and our sacred watershed, and she's fighting the good fight. So I want everyone to welcome Sherry Wilson, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Dean. That was terrific. And, you know, Dean, I've been working just a couple of years longer than you. So I was working in Maryland prior to the arrival of the river keepers. And it is just one of the best things that has happened, because every river has somebody who knows it intimately and is around every single day. And it just expands the work and the protection and the conservation by orders of magnitude. So it's a very cool thing to have watched. All right, so Dean set it up beautifully about the problems with plastic. And, you know, it's important to recognize that in the past 15 years, as Dean was referencing, the production of plastic has doubled. And the plastics industry itself projects that it will triple over the next 30 years. So the magnitude of what the issues that raises are enormous. And so what I was going to do is just take a few minutes tonight to talk to you about a new policy in the US that we're hoping to bring to Maryland, and that we think can have a big impact on not only plastics, but the rest of the litter that I know you're all familiar with. So Trash Free Maryland is an organization in Maryland, the only one that focuses exclusively on trash and litter. So we do this every day. And I know many of you have participated in cleanups, and we like to say one cleanup and one policy at a time. So we are trying to harness the results of all the cleanups that everybody across Maryland does by collecting the data. And I'll get to that a little bit later, but that data, and even if it's uneven, even if it's anecdotal, even if it is from a very narrow geographic area, it is very readily turned into policy action. And so that's what we're going to talk about tonight, this new policy that we're hoping to bring to Maryland. It's called Extended Producer Responsibility for Packaging. The shorthand that you'll probably hear more and more about is EPR, so EPR for packaging. And so let's just talk a little bit about that tonight. Dean mentioned a couple of the problems that we're facing. The recycling rates are up and down, but not consistent. And the actual recycling at the end of the process is fairly low. Plastics, for example, the national rate of plastic that actually gets recycled is somewhere around 9%. So we're not even coming close. Our recycling streams have a lot of contamination. Contamination meaning that it's very difficult to separate the glass from the aluminum, from the different types of plastics. Makes it very hard for the processors to actually use the materials again. As Dean alluded to, or mentioned, China stopped taking the US recyclables. What we've all seen and learned from that is just how volatile the markets for recycled feedstock is. They literally go up and down every month. So, 1 month you're getting a decent price for cardboard. The next month, the bottom falls out of it. So it's a very hard business. And it is, it's just proving to be very challenging. All of the recyclables are collected locally. And so getting them to be processed and reused can be challenging, and it varies from place to place. We talked about the advent of single-use plastics. These are the items that you use once and throw away. My favorite example is, we all know about salt. We used to get it in a box. Now, if you go to the grocery store, you can actually find sometimes that salt is only being sold in a plastic bottle, and that doesn't have to be. So there's just a very large increase in packaging of products in plastic. I know you're familiar with litter and trash. Consumer choice, going back to the salt bottle that I just mentioned, oftentimes now, even if you're knowledgeable enough to know that if you buy something in a plastic container, and then you look for the type of plastic that's actually recycled in your area, there are very few choices for us as consumers. If we go to this grocery store to get salt and it's only in a plastic container, there's no choice. I already talked about the projected increase in plastic production. And then there's the consumer cost. So if you think about this with our recyclables, we pay for the product, we pay for the packaging, and then we use the product, and then we pay for its disposal. We're either paying through taxes for a local recycling program, or perhaps if you're in a rural area, you're actually driving your recyclables to a collection center. You're using your resources there. So the products that we are consuming, in some ways we pay for them on the front end, and then we pay for them on the back end. So those are some of the issues that we are trying to address. So how do you get your head around all of this? So we've already got recycling mandates in Maryland. We've had them since the early 1990s, and our recycling programs have grown. They are much more robust than they had been in the early 90s. People are generally accustomed to, in our area, to participating in recycling programs, but it's only gotten us so far, and we're still encountering all of these problems, which are resulting in fairly disappointing recycling rates. So our organization first got its start looking at single-use items and banning them. So for example, if you live in Maryland, you may have noticed the polystyrene foam foodware containers that you used to get your takeout food in. Working with a coalition of organizations, including those like Dean's, we were able to pass a ban on those kinds of food takeout containers. And now if you do a cleanup in Maryland, you may find a handful of those, but they are old and deteriorated. It is nothing like 6 or 7 years ago before the ban went into effect, and you'd find them all over the place. So if you have been doing cleanups over the past 10 years or so, you may have noticed this. It's pretty noticeable, and these bans work. There are now 16 jurisdictions in Maryland that have banned the grocery style plastic bags, and including Baltimore City. And in Baltimore, the annual trash count that is held by the Baltimore Waterfront Partnership has found a significant decrease in the number of plastic bags that are in the waterways leading into the Baltimore Harbor. So there's a lot of hard proof that those kinds of bans work. The problem is we cannot ban everything. You know, at some point we have to get a different approach, because we just can't ban items one by one. We would never get there. We would never get far enough. So now we're seeing a proliferation in other states of post-consumer content laws. These are laws that require that products, for example, made of plastic need to use 10 or 20 or 30% post-consumer recycled content. And the point of those laws is to drive demand for the recyclables that we're either putting out at the curb or driving to a collection station. So that's a way to get some better results. Education, always. Penalties, yes, but you can't, we're not going to be able to educate and find our way out of this. It's sort of a systemic system that's a systemic shift that's happening with the proliferation of plastics, but also consumerism in our society. You know, we collectively buy a lot of products. And when you think about the 3 R's that we all learned, reduce, reuse, recycle, you'll notice I'm talking all about recycling. And that's step 3. We have lost the reduce and the reuse. So that's another part of our challenge. So 2 other solutions that are very common and popular right now for good reason. One is a bottle bill. There are 10 states in the United States where you can take your beverage container, you pay a deposit when you purchase it, typically 5 or 10 cents. You can then redeem that container and get your 5 or 10 cents back. There are 10 states that have these laws in place. They have an extremely high recycling rate. In those states, typically you'll get 80 to 90% of the beverage containers being returned. Really great results. We've had a proposal last year in Maryland. We had one this year. They have not moved. And Maryland has tried this several different times, but we have not been able to get a bill passed. There are a lot of people across the country, though, trying to get these laws in place. But the 10 states that have the laws have had them for quite some time. There is a significant pushback against those kinds of laws. So that leads us to what we're going to talk about tonight, which is producer responsibility. And this is something that basically says if you're going to produce the product, you've got to make sure that whatever is left over once the product is used is recyclable in some way. And the advantage to us consumers of this is that it shifts the cost of disposal basically from us as taxpayers to the people who are actually making the choices on how to package the products that we're buying, because we don't have much choice. And so this is sort of a systemic change. And why are we focused on packaging? Because nationally, packaging makes up about 30% of our waste stream. So not only do we have the plastics problem and the growing volume of plastics, which has such, a long life, like literally hundreds of years, and in some are projecting thousands. But of our waste stream, about 1/3 of it is packaging. So that's why we're focused on packaging. It is in place in other parts of the world. The countries here in blue are all practicing producer responsibility for packaging. And in the United States, Maine, Oregon, California, and Colorado have relatively new laws, 1, 2, and 3 years old, and they are in the process of implementing this. And in Maryland, we got a law passed last year that requires a recommendation by an advisory council that we're participating on by December of this year. So the way it works basically is the law requires the producers of packaging to form an organization and to create their own incentive system. So instead of the state or the federal government regulating directly how the packaging is designed, the producers get together, they create an incentive program that charges their own members, the producers of the packaging, it's a fraction of a penny kind of fee. And basically, the more you reduce the volume of the packaging and the more recyclable what's left is, the fee becomes very nominal. If you are, triple packaging your salt in 3 layers of plastic, you're going to pay the highest fee. There's been a lot of research across the globe really showing that this program and policy does not shift costs to consumers. And so we are hopeful that we can bring this to Maryland. And it's brand new. You'll hear about it, EPR for packaging. So that's what we're working on. And I want to stop there. So thank you all so much for paying attention. And I really appreciate it and appreciate the opportunity to be here with you tonight.
Thank you so much, Sherry. And for anyone that's unmuted, please mute yourself. We just have a few more minutes and then we can all unmute and we'll have a chance to speak to our guest in just a moment. But I'm saving someone who is very special to our organization, and I want to make sure I give a warm welcome to Reba Caruth. We also have her here tonight because she is a phenomenal active green team leader for the Baha'is of Bethesda, and she is also on our board. She is heading our program and advocacy committee. So very grateful to have her here as well. And thank you again to Sherry and Dean. They're going to stay with us. So just hang tight, folks. We'll have some time to talk to them at the end. And please welcome Reba.
So good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this learning lab to highlight the importance of Earth Day. In the Baha'i faith, we have a strong belief, a spiritual belief, a universal belief that the earth is but one country and mankind are its citizens. And I think that is the key here tonight for our green team approach in the IPC and the role of our universal spiritual beliefs in the responsibility that each of us have, regardless of our faith communities, to recognize that we are responsible for the care of God's creation of nature, and that we each have responsibilities as individuals, as communities, and as nations. Now, in the Chesapeake Bay region, what we have really is a region which was the seat of the British Empire here in North America for the Atlantic part of the United States, what we now call the Mid-Atlantic. And we became focused on this in terms of our green team work because, first of all, we are part of the Chesapeake Bay watershed. There are several states that are part of that. This watershed agreement and framework actually goes back to colonial times. And really what we're dealing with now is the movement of time and place in terms of these initial problems of having cooperation on what is a common good. And the common good that George Washington and the other leaders of the new states after the Revolutionary War recognized was this watershed. It provided food for the local populations, it provided food for global trade. The waters still are tied and will always be tied to strategic defense. Most goods around the world are still moving on ships. So that's one dimension of it. But one of the most important dimensions for our green team and for the issue of our responsibility to care for creation and sustainable environment is this issue of civic responsibilities. Again, we're all citizens, and citizens don't just have rights, but we have responsibilities. So that's really where we began with our training with the Green Team training program with the IPC, Baha'i community on this issue. And in our Baha'i community in Bethesda, one of the things we did a few years ago was to host a town hall meeting. And Jody, the previous executive director of the Interfaith Partners of the Chesapeake, was one of our guest speakers. We also have one of the senior directors of the Montgomery County Department of Environmental Protection, and one of the vice presidents of WSSC Water. So that's really where we come to this issue of clean water and local waterways and what our responsibilities and obligations are. So in each case, what we were doing was basically having each speaker address from their vantage point how they see this issue of clean water in the local watersheds, and in terms of our bigger issue of our common good of having clean water and what we could do, and how that fit into the bigger and higher spiritual universal framework of caring for creation. Because water and trees are symbolic relative to most faith traditions. But in the Baha'i faith tradition, we also have a framework of the matrix of nature, in which human beings and societies are part of it, but we're also part of a bigger weave, which includes other elements of nature. So this issue of clean waters and local waterways became the focus of our evolution and activity, in which we are now beyond just the Baha'i community of Bethesda. We have Baha'i communities in the Baltimore County, Baltimore City area, Rockville, Maryland, Northern Virginia, Washington, D.C., that are all now working together on what we could call a Chesapeake, not a greater Chesapeake, but let's say a DMV Chesapeake framework for cooperation and collaboration for clean water. Because to have clean water, you have to have cooperation and you have to have unity. And that is something, again, coming across time and place that the Mount Vernon Compact represented. So after the Revolutionary War, Maryland and Virginia were very important states, but they weren't getting along. We were going to break into separate countries. So one of the issues was who controlled the Potomac River, not just in terms of the clean water and the fishing, but who controlled it. So to have them come to Mount Vernon and work out a framework for cooperation was a big deal. And then eventually there's an Annapolis Convention, which begins to involve other states, because the Chesapeake Bay watershed goes all the way up to New York. A lot of people don't realize that. New York, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia. The District of Columbia was created from part of Maryland and Virginia to create an independent seat for the federal government. But all of these elements are still very important for what we're doing today with our Green Team, because what we're doing is twofold. One, we are engaging with established organization and partners in our local communities and in our greater communities to directly participate on the ground with the water cleanups of the rivers and local streams and creeks. That means getting out there, getting our hands dirty, participating in the actual cleanup activities that are being hosted by the Potomac Conservancy, by the Gunpowder Valley Conservancy, and by the Rock Creek Park Conservancy. And these activities involve removing, obviously, plastic, but also other types of trash and debris that may be in the creeks and waters, but also may be in the parks that are basically the place where the creeks and waters are running. Because if there's litter in the park, it will end up in the waterways, and it will end up as a problem in terms of our drinking water. But the other issue is the issue of stormwater, which is a climate issue. So this is a very layered issue and threat in terms of our clean local waterways, because we are situated within a larger watershed, which is the greater regional watershed, and we are basically situated downwater. So pollution coming from New York and Pennsylvania, from agricultural farms, from manufacturing, or whatever, it makes its way here. So regardless of what we're doing in Maryland and Virginia, again, this is a historical problem that really comes to the forefront now, because we're trying to manage water quality here at the local level, the county municipal level, cooperation through different counties within states, but also across now the DMV to address this issue, because these rivers also cut across different states and jurisdictions and principalities. So the Potomac River, part of it is in Maryland, part of it is connected to the District of Columbia, part of it is going into Virginia, and then it turns into another river system. So you can see how really, in many ways, it's really the need to see this bigger picture of community and responsibility and position it in the context of our spiritual obligation of caring for God's creation. And that is important, again, because of this matrix of nature element that we in the Baha'i faith see as a very important principle. So being part of the matrix of nature means we have other life forms that are part of our life system. Some of them are visual, like birds and animals, trees, but some of them are mineral, under the ground, under the water. A lot of people don't know this, but not only do we have armaments that are dumped into the water, but for many years, a lot of companies disposed of their waste in waterways. I mean, that was just standard practice. I used to work for Honeywell for many years ago. And I know that one of the issues is that you go out to the middle of the ocean beyond your jurisdictional restricted territory, where at that time there wasn't any legal, it still isn't because the law of the sea agreement is not finalized. There's really no way to stop any country or any company from just dumping its waste and in the ocean in barrels that they think will last forever, which don't last forever, which resurface and can make their way back into the Chesapeake Bay. But another issue is the fact that as we speak, there is a big push now with the blue economy, which is intensifying the drilling and the extraction of minerals and rare earths from the seabed. So that's a pollution risk that is also a new development there, but it's also a risk when you add it with the others that requires a clear focus on the collective good and protection of clean water as a collective good for the greater community. And that is an agreement and a framework in terms of what we are doing as a green team that really is central to what we're talking about here tonight and what we're doing in terms of our collective action for not just Earth Day, but Earth Month, Earth Year, Earth Century, just Earth. Now, another thing that's very important to know is that in addition to cleaning up streams and rivers, the other element of the matrix of nature is making sure that we restore the elements of the natural environment and God's creation that are here in part to do the work of removing pollution. So one of our guests here tonight is Peter Goddard, who I'll let address this issue in terms of what he's doing in terms of native tree planting and forest restoration, but in particular, the restoration of native trees on the sides of the river banks and the stream banks. These are called riparian, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, riparian buffers, because we also collaborate and have relations with departments of natural resources. In addition to conservancies, we work with departments of natural resources, in particular their forestry departments in Northern Virginia for some of these invasive weed removal activities, also in Maryland through Rock Creek Park and the things that they're doing. These parks are also part of the state and local park service, but also the National Park Service and the national natural resource departments. And one of the issues is that these trees do a lot of work in terms of pulling the toxins out of water, in addition to stabilizing the erosion of soil and sediment into the water. So we've got a pollution of water because of the crumbling, if you will, of the riverbanks and the soil going into the water. We've got pollution of water because of stormwater, the fact that trees were removed, native trees, native plants and flowers are removed, and they can't hold and do the job that they're supposed to do. And the other thing is we're really developing stronger knowledge of the role of marine life and also the wildlife in terms of this bigger matrix of nature. Because one of the things that's very important to know is that trees provide our homes because they provide wood, but they provide homes for these animals, which pollinate these native if you will, native plants and flowers, which are important for addressing pollution from stormwater. So I think we have, as a green team, we spent the last year or two really developing knowledge and capacity beyond just the activities that we're participating in terms of actual stream cleanups in Maryland and Virginia and DC, to include also native tree planting, also acorn collections. That's another big thing in the DMV area, collecting the seeds of the native trees, which are acorns, in the fall, and turning them into our departments of natural resources, the forestry people, basically. And they turn them over to the state nurseries, and they cultivate these acorns. These acorn seedlings are then planted on the riverbeds. So we focused on they focused on increasingly working together, Maryland, Virginia, and DC, and next fall, you're going to see much more stronger collaboration, but it started with sort of local initiatives, but now it really has become a region-wide initiative for the Chesapeake region. The other thing is they're moving beyond the Potomac River. And as my understanding, the Shenandoah River also will be benefiting from the planting of these native acorn seeds. And these are things, by the way, that all faith communities and green teams and community and civic organizations can become involved in. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. What we have to reinvent is stronger community and stronger civic engagement that is based on a spiritual, universal, bipartisan, non-political framework of the collective good and the common good. And that's how we see it. Yeah.
Oh, my apologies, Reba.
Yes. So with that, I'd like to turn the microphone back over to you, Sarah, but we do have Peter Goddard here. I don't think we have time for our representatives who are working with native flowers and plants and whatever, but we can do that another time. But this is really something that we really are very appreciative of, and we hope that when the Earth Month is over, that more people and more faith communities can join us in these activities and maybe have some high-level elevated retreats. One thing the forester did say for Maryland, by the way, each county in Maryland and Virginia have assigned to them now a forester. They says, Reba, people really don't get what trees are. They're more than just things to look at. They actually are doing the work of cleaning the air, because pollution comes from particulate matter, comes to the waters of the Chesapeake Bay. That is a source of pollution. Emissions from cars. So we haven't even really talked about the issue of renewable energy transition, but emissions from cars and any automotive vehicle that has a diesel engine is polluting the Chesapeake Bay.
This is a very big problem, and this is such a robust conversation, and I am just overwhelmed with gratitude for the offer to come back and dig a little bit more. I'm sure that other folks would like to hear about more of the activities. I just want to be mindful of time. It's very crazy to me that the hour has just slipped by. There's been a lot of great discussion. We are so grateful to you, Reba, for all that you're doing for our organization, for everything that you're doing for your congregation and members throughout the entire region. As you mentioned, they're all over. So as we're coming up over the hour, I wanted to give folks the opportunity to leave, since we are at 8. But prior to, we always close the program with a prayer. And it is my hope, if our gracious speakers don't mind hanging out for a few more minutes, I'd like to just close the program, and then we'll open up the floor for questions and answers, if that's possible, if we could take a few after we close the program. So Rebecca, thank you so much. If we could just move one slide before, there we go. It's just the excitement of spring, because this is my month as well. For many that maybe don't know me as well, I kind of always celebrate for spring. So January, it's great to have the resolutions, but this is my new year, and I hope you enjoy this prayer as well. Dear Lord, you have what it takes to make this spring my best spring ever. You can make this spring amazing, astounding, and astronomically awesome. You can bring bountiful blessings to me and everyone here in this room with me this evening. You can help me create a continually contagious, caring, and compassionate attitude in my heart. You can design and deploy desirable, dynamic dreams about my destiny that will capture my imagination and ignite my determination. You can open seamlessly endless streams of encouragement and edification to me, and you can flow your living water into my heart and inspire me to be freshly and faithfully focused on you. My prayer request to you, Lord, is don't hold back. Let all the wisdom, insights, healing, mercies, financial, provisional, relationship, blessings, and dynamic energy that you have given to me start flowing without hindrance. And Lord, I will seek to put myself in a position to cooperate with you, yield to you, and receive from you. With excitement and love, I pray. Amen. So thank you so much for hanging with me and sharing that moment. I want to put a survey link here. This will be Sarah, you're muted. Sarah, you're muted. Thank you so much, Bonnie. So yeah, just in short, please share your feedback. We take it very seriously. We greatly appreciate your thoughts, your ideas, what you want to hear from us, and any feedback is deeply appreciated. We'll still keep recording for the Q&A, but again, folks, if you want to, you are free to leave. And thank you for the speakers who are still with us. If I may, because I see a couple hands up, what I'd like to do is just read one or two of the first questions, and then we can, all unmute and just ask the speakers. This first one, though, looks like it's directed towards you, Dean. And the question is, where do those toxic bricks from the coal ash go? Where is their final resting place, if you know?
So they're not toxic. Basically, when you take coal ash and you dry it out, the big thing with coal ash, particularly whether it's a landfill or a coal ash pond, is that it sits in these, unlined pits. And then when water gets in there, these dissolved metals leach their way into groundwater, into surface water, into people's drinking wells, right? And so what you do is you take this coal ash out, and while it's active, while it's there, you dry it out, and it is dangerous in the dust stage. It's called fugitive dust. It's regulated under the federal CCR rules. But basically what you do is you encapsulate it. You put it in a block and brick, and you put it in asphalt. You can put it in other things too. The Roman aqueducts were built with volcanic ash, which has very similar chemical characteristics. They're still standing today because coal ash and volcanic ash make concrete harder, and it binds, and it gets harder and stronger over 50, 100 years. So when we talk about rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure, we have all this coal ash. And what's crazy, and most people don't realize, we're importing coal ash from Turkey and other countries. We're importing coal ash when we have this abundant supply of coal ash left over from our legacy of coal on the ground. So the best way to clean it up is to not put it in a landfill into another community that doesn't want it, but actually take it out of the ground, put it in a block and brick, and distribute it and put it into, and it's been proven by EPA to be very safe because it's dried out, it's encapsulated, it poses no risk to anybody. So that is the best way to deal with coal ash.
That is absolutely fascinating, and to know that that has that purpose in its end life cycle. We need more cross-collaborative efforts between agencies to utilize that. We also have one from Lisa that's directed to you, Sherry. This is a question about, are producers saving money as they reduce their packaging? Is there any data, or do you know of any instances where, yes, you're seeing that correlation?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that in part is why producers have been, I'm not going to say receptive and enthusiastic, but the reason we're getting these programs in place is because in countries where the program is already in place, just there are cost savings in the reduction of the volume of the material oftentimes. But in order for them to sort of re-engineer their design, they have to go back and look at all their processes. And so there's research showing that not only are they saving on material, but they are also finding inefficiencies in their manufacturing process, which, you know, is good. It's helpful. Yeah, so it's a brilliant question, very insightful.
And thanks for sharing that. It does seem logical that that correlation would happen. But I think some folks are unsure like of how regulation can spur innovation. So that's good to see that there's already positive, you know, results with that. I can't see everyone because of my view. I apologize. There's a couple pages I'm looking at, but I do see some folks have their hands up. I see Jan, Mark. And if anyone has their hand up, I apologize if I haven't called your name and I'm not seeing you. Please feel free to unmute. And you know, we have a few more questions we'd like to answer that in the last couple minutes.
This is Mark. I want to share something extremely exciting for interfaith partners. About 10 years ago, an expert in the ancient language that the people did before Christ, about where it says man shall have dominion over the earth. He found out that when that word dominion was used by the people that put it into that version of the Bible at the time, dominion meant take care of. And so the organization Creation Cares now says the Bible actually says not we have dominion over the earth, but we're supposed to take care of it. I just wanted to pass that on.
No, I love that. Thank you. It's always great to hear of like things change with new understanding of translation. So thank you for sharing that. And I believe Jan too, you had your hand up. Please go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, a question for Dean. What wasn't there a bill going through Annapolis about what I cannot understand is what is this? The Clean Water Act exists, so why isn't it enforced or why is it seemingly ignored? Also, what is this other bill that I was really scared to hear about? I thought it was going through Annapolis this session where you can't sue. You can't be a citizen and sue, something about standing. And it sounded kind of frightening, like that if you're living in a community that has polluted water, if you're an outsider or something like that, you cannot sue and get the cleanup done. I just don't understand. We've got a Clean Water Act. Why is it people are breaking the law like this? Is there just not enough enforcement? And not enough people in enforcement? Or why does it get ignored? Why we have to keep renewing it? It's like reauthorizing. It's like the Lilly Ledbetter Act. Why don't we have a Fair Pay Act? So
okay, one of the reasons is the Supreme Court last year misinterpreted the Clean Water Act and thought it only applies to water that's in motion as opposed to intermittent water. And so we have to have our own new standards. Maryland's passing laws, so forth, or get the Supreme Court to reverse itself if we get a new Supreme Court. But that's a big part of the problem. One example of that is where we have vernal pools. So they should be protected. And we have a bill in Maryland that will protect vernal pools, but we have to take that action. That's part of the answer to the question.
okay.
Yeah, and as far as enforcement goes, I mean, basically, it is a serious problem. Under the Hogan administration, enforcement dropped by 85% over the 8 years. So one of the things that we worked on 2 years ago was getting, with the new Moore administration, like 160 new Maryland Department of Environment employees. But at the same time, a lot of time there's pressure, right? So from both sides of the political aisle, right? And so when all of a sudden there's pressure on a polluter to upgrade, and make, significant investments, whether it's air permits or water permits. A lot of time the polluter goes crying to lawmakers, and the lawmakers then lean on the agencies and say, hey, you need to stand down. And that's where we come in and saying, no, 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 you need to do your job, actually. And we sue the agencies sometimes for failing to do their job. But in general, there just is not enough Clean Water Act enforcement. And in my opinion, there's often not enough guts with the agency to actually do meaningful enforcement and holding these polluters accountable until someone like me comes along and, flags this issue and gets it into the media and starts making attention. But if it goes unnoticed, it goes unnoticed. And that's a huge problem. We did just pass a bill called the Clean Water Justice Act, and it
That's
reauthorized
it. Yeah.
those waters that lost protection in Maryland. We're probably the only state in the country now that now has those federal protections restored. One of the things that was happening just a week ago was the League of Municipalities and others were saying, hey, you know what, we like this bill. Communities should be able to protect themselves with, dirty water or pollution, but, we don't think municipalities should be part of that, right? And often, like, I'm suing Metcom sewage downriver. I sued Alexandria. A lot of times it is municipalities causing major pollution. And so we fought like hell to make sure that they were put back into that, right? And we actually prevailed. And there's some give and take. That's what I don't like about legislation. I think the Clean Water Act should apply to all waters in the United States. Supreme Court got it wrong. And unfortunately, we've lost major protections across waterways all across the country. And we did take a really important first step to reauthorize those protections right here in Maryland. And that bill is basically on its way to passage as long as the governor signs it. It seems like it anyway.
Oh, that's great to know.
I'm grateful for that. And sorry to just jump in because I found out not everyone knew this. But the whole Watersheds Protection Act, I got confirmation that did pass. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Someone sent me an email.
That's
Was very
great.
happy about that. And thanks to everyone who, participated in our advocacy and our lobby night. I'm not going to say it was us, but we were very, very grateful for all the extra help. And that was a very big bill we were passionate about. So yeah, thank you, Dean, for explaining that.
I do have to take credit. Betsy Nicholas, our vice president, is the one who introduced that bill basically and got that bill to happen and did a lot of the legwork behind the scene to make that bill pass and then work to fix that bill when it was broken. And really, there was a lot of people that deserve a lot of credit, and specifically the lawmakers that stood strong. But I will tell you, behind the scenes, Betsy Nicholas, our VP, was a major driver, and we are the ones that actually pushed that bill from day one.
That is awesome. Thank you so much. I wish I would have had carved out a little bit more time just to speak a little bit more about that. But thank you so much for giving that context.
I had another question related to that, but maybe I can get his email and ask that.
Yes, not to sound redundant, but as with customary, all post recording, we will have everyone's contact information. You will also get the chat from the evening. So any questions that we aren't able to address right now will be addressed. And so you'll have answers in the post recording, and we'll make sure everyone gets connected. But I see there's a few more hands. Do we have enough time to take one or two last questions for the evening? If the speakers are okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. A couple of people are dropping off, but I still see, it looks like Lisa, I'm sorry, you said you had another question, correct? Or did you just want to connect afterwards?
I put my email in the chat.
Thank you, Dean. Mark, thanks for joining us this evening.
Well, thanks for the program. My question's for Sherry. I got a bunch of questions in time for only one, so I'll try to be quick. It's great what you guys are doing in terms of trying to control all of the EPR work and control the packaging on that side. I'm just curious, are packaging and consumer products companies using us consumers as an excuse to produce the packaging they're producing by saying, well, consumers are demanding this pouch versus this cardboard box or whatever. So are they kind of throwing us under the bus? And is there anything combined with that that we can do as consumers to kind of push back on their practices and let them know that we want them to change?
Wow, those are good questions. I think there definitely is some of the consumers want it, the demand is there, but I think a lot of it is driven by the lightweight nature of plastic, so it's reducing shipping costs. And there are a lot of people who are using petroleum who are looking for new ways to market their product. So I think that's probably the big economic engine that's driving everything. But yes, as consumers, we can definitely, you can vote with your pocketbook. So although you may not have a pocketbook, that's like a phrase my grandmother used to use. But you can, if there is a deodorant, for example, that's packaged in paper, give it a try. I mean, all these alternative packaging possibilities, they are out there. They're in very small volumes. You have to look for them. They're not going to be at the end cap of the aisle. They're going to be somewhere in the shelf. But producers are trying those packages out because they're required to produce them in other countries. So they're already set up for it. It's a global marketplace. So you do see these things from time to time. So definitely give them a try. And if if you're the kind of person who's in touch with legislators or the kind of person who's going to write to a company or put a review on online, definitely let them know. I think it does make a difference. They watch public opinion like hawks, as of course we all would if we were in the production business. So thanks for the question.
Sherry mentioned the 3 R's. There's a 4th R: reduce, reuse, recycle, refuse. I have started to refuse using plastic products. I try to use recyclable metals, and cardboard and paper products are far better than plastic, which is destroying our oceans, our waterways, and our public health. And so refuse these items that are being pushed on us and try your very best. Just start building it in your life cycle. That's what I've done slowly over time as I've learned more about this.
So
I'm
the
grateful for
question
that.
for you, Jen and Sherry, paper versus plastics. The problem with using paper is if it's not done right, you're cutting down forests that shouldn't be cut down. So we need tree crops and in disturbed areas already and things like that. So how do we tell whether the paper product is destroying forests or not?
So there are some certifications you can look for, and you're absolutely right. You can look for recycled paper content. You can look for these FSC type certifications. But the bottom line for me, at least, is the paper actually breaks down. The plastic does not. So at the end of the day, even if I can't tell what kind of paper it is and where it's coming from, if I were given the 2 choices, I'd go paper. That's just me personally.
Those bottles in the Potomac River last 500 years that are used
Yeah.
one time. And they're breaking down, they're getting into our fish. It's just a far bigger crisis than paper issues. And we need to do more to have, recyclable content and using products like hemp and other things like bamboo that's renewable and sustainable and can be grown quickly rather than, cutting down 75-year-old trees that are producing a lot of oxygen and eliminating CO2 from our atmosphere. I agree with that. But plastic is a crisis. It is a crisis, and it's linked to climate change. It's linked to oil production. Bottom line.
Just to clarify, there are some bamboo species you should never use. They're too invasive. Others you can. So people, please choose the right species of bamboo.
And I'm grateful, Dean, you really brought up a good comment that's not talked about enough. And we're going to be focusing on that more. We do have some action kits that are slated to be produced, which is moving towards the zero waste lifestyle, right? And it seems like it's very overwhelming to, stop everything you're doing, but there's a lot of small everyday choices that you can make that will lead to that lifestyle. And just to end on the public health issue, part of my other training was in psychology, and I worked with a lot of special needs populations. There are a lot of studies that are coming out now that are also linking microplastics, specifically microplastics, to cognitive delays, to cognitive impairments. I mean, Dean, you really hit the nail on the head in terms of an overall crisis. It's just infiltrated negatively in every area of our life, aside from one application that I feel like should get exemption, and that's hospitals, right? Like any type of hospital grade, if it's needed to save someone's life, I think we all can agree then it has a use. But this everyday single use throwing away, I constantly am worried about that when I think about my kids and their kids, and none of my kids drink out of plastic bottles. That's for sure. So
Like
I appreciate the deep dive
this is
in
this
the
is a
problem.
change I just made. This is my laundry detergent. This box right here, and then these little sheets right here. No more plastic jugs coming into my
God,
house.
those. Yeah.
Right. And I'm sure a lot of you are using them, but you know, these are just recent changes that I've made. So anyway,
I have the
Kind is
sheets
that?
too. That's Grove. Dean, I think you have Grove, correct? Yeah, yeah, I'm familiar with them. And I'll just one caveat to that. You can get a lot of cleaning power out of those. So they have strips, right? It like comes as a full square. Maybe that's something I can help with the post recording. I'll give a couple links. I use a couple of these products too. And so, you know, if it's a small load, you just tear it in half. And if it's a big load, you use the whole sheet. And they're really effective. They're really effective. So yeah, thanks for all that. Before I bore everyone and talk any further, we are really past the hour, and I'm very thankful for this deep, meaningful conversation. I wanted to just give a last call for a dire question out there. Anything else, we will get back to you in the chat, as I mentioned. But please feel free. This this has been a wonderful evening, and thank you so much, Dean and Sherry, for sharing all your wisdom. Reba, you just are so eloquent. You're such a natural speaker. I really appreciate you kind of grounding us and bringing back to why we're here, which is this moral call. And so all of our faiths have this tenet. And I appreciate you spending a little bit of time talking about that. Thank you.
Pleasure.
All right, and if that's all, everyone have a wonderful weekend.
Could I
Y'all
make
have
a
a good night.
comment?
Thank you
Could I
all.
make-
Good to see you all.
Bonnie and Lisa, yeah.
Bye, goodbye.
Hello?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, yeah, someone was mentioning they wanted to make a comment.
Oh yeah, just one more. I think there's been some back and forth about, you know, it's the individual responsibility, all the jokes that came out about using paper straws is going to save the planet. No, it won't. And I'm thinking about, you know, doing these life changes, you know, the way we consume things. It's really stop them from manufacturing the plastic bottles. I mean, one person said, they're not making water, they're making plastic in those water bottles. Real hard to get away from when you have conferences, right? But then
Oh,
again,
yes.
we make them stop doing that because it's more like it's on the shelf, it's right there. But then I go back to the individual responsibility, and I think this is actually raising awareness. It gets people talking. Maybe they'll have arguments about who's supposed to be doing what, but people have been changing the way they look at things. You know, even though it's controversial or people feel like it's not their responsibility to do this, but it's made things change. I mean, I don't see as many plastic bags in the trees anymore.
I can second that. Yeah, and that's it just driving up and down the beltway, I would always think about that, like, oh, there's uh the plastic bags are just they're insidious. So
You know,
yes,
so
and it's
changing the mindset. It's the mindset. It's what we're used to, and even nostalgia plays a part, you know.
This is true. We're hoping what you just mentioned, though. I mean, the end goal is behavior change, right? So collectively, as we all make these decisions, I think socially responsible companies, they see the trends, and so we, as you mentioned, we've been able to make changes in the past, and the more we work together, the better the changes we can make for the future.
I was gonna say two things, guys. So not to date myself, but I remember when plastic became a thing. I remember before there was plastic. So it's been within our lifetimes that this has happened. I grew up in New York City. Drinks came in cans and bottles, and they all had a deposit on them, and they all went back. So if we change to one way, we can change back. So, more power to us all to do that. And then there's not that many of us left. I had put it in the chat, but come back in June when we're going to be showing the story of plastic. And I put the link in there about our new trash reduction take at home action kit that Sarah worked really hard on. So take a look at that, and hopefully we can start putting that into practices at your congregation.
Thank you, Bonnie. Yeah, and thank you, everyone. Please don't, I'm not holding you. Please feel free to leave. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for staying for the Q&A. And thank you for everyone who's filled out the survey. I did see, so very grateful for your thoughts on that.